All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Grid Encore. I'm your host, Ben Schneider. Brandon Crossland's basketball team keeps winning, which means they keep playing games, so they had another game tonight, so he is unavailable once again, but filling in for him, our NASCAR Cup Series recap writer, Matthew Bro. Matthew, good to see you. How's it going?
Likewise, good to see you. I'm hanging in there. You know, weather up here is not the nicest, but racing has started back up, so that makes my day. How about yourself, Ben? How are you doing?
I am doing well. The weather's been quite cold up here in Mass as well. I don't think we've gotten nearly as much snow as you have, even though we have gotten more than we've gotten the last couple of years up here. I'm a little bit closer to the shore, so Boston's snow totals are probably a little bit higher than what we have here in Beverly, but it's nice to have a kind of start entering the phase where the spring weather is going to return here. I think we're going to have a couple of 50-degree days this week, and then it'll only go up from here, which will be a nice relief. They say March comes in like a lion, goes out like a lamb, right? So we only got a couple more weeks, hopefully, of some of these days where it's in the 20s and 30s, and then we'll get some relief from that. But things are going well over here. We've got a lot to discuss. We've got some breaking news that came in this morning that we'll start off with in an open segment. We're going to talk about the short course at COTA and how that works, and maybe compare that to a couple other tracks on the NASCAR schedule. And then, of course, we'll get into a series we normally cover here at NASCAR Xfinity Series. Connor Zilisch, a lot of hype around that young man, and deservedly so. And Indy NXT back this weekend as well. We'll go through the rundown of those race results at the end of the program as well. But first, as always, I want to give a shout out to our Patreon investors, Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. If I can find the graphic, there it is. Thank you so much for continuing to support what we do here at the Grid Network. And if you like what you see tonight, you want to consider investing in our shows and our on-air talent to help not only keep us on the air throughout 2025 and beyond, but help us get to the track and cover races on site on a more regular basis. You can consider joining them through the link in the description box below, or if you'd rather make a one-time contribution instead, you can find us on Buy Me a Coffee or visit the YouTube Super Chat option as well if you're watching us live, or Super Thanks if you're watching after the fact as well. And it looks like we've got a couple of chat comments here already. Good to see a day in the life. One of our regulars, solid weekend of racing across the globe. Yeah, we're firmly in the racing season now here in the first weekend in March. And good to see Adam as well. I'll send you guys some warm weather here in North Carolina. Well, even you guys, I feel like, I think Kobe was saying he's gotten some snow here for the first time in several years this winter. So, yeah, I don't know. Just the trends, I guess, are kind of moving in the other direction now for some of us. Heavier snow totals than we've been accustomed to here over the last couple of years. So we'll see. Hopefully we get some relief from that here as we get into the springtime here in just a few weeks. Now, Matthew, I want to start tonight. We got some news this morning. I know you were excited in our group chat. Catherine Legg is going to make her Cup Series debut. Of course, she's made a couple of stock car starts here recently. Ran the ARCA race at Daytona, ran the Indianapolis 500 the last couple of years as well. She does have some NASCAR Xfinity Series experience. What's your reaction to the news, first and foremost, that she's going to be in the Live Fast Motorsports number 78 of Phoenix?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny how I think I sent something in our group chat earlier in the week. She posted something on her Instagram story, and you could tell it was a car, but it looked kind of like a stock car. And then if you do the phone trick a lot of people do and up the exposure and stuff, you saw it was the number 78 with the sponsor. I can't think off the top of my head what it is. And it's like, oh my God, she's going Cup racing. I was thinking, is she going to do the double? That would be awesome. But no, it's very exciting. Not only just I love the idea of bringing new faces to NASCAR. And I know she's been here before. She has extensive motorsport experience. So that's why I'm very excited to have her at the Cup level. I know it's Phoenix. It's a little different than if you tried to put her in the 500, for example, but to put her on a short track like this in a Live Fast number 78 Chevrolet, you got to be excited, right? I mean, she's so many disciplines. Anytime she wants to race, she'll get in whatever car and she'll go out there. Whether she wins or not, whatever place she finishes on Sunday, it's going to be exciting, and it's historic when you think about it, right? We haven't had a NASCAR Cup Series driver that was female or a woman NASCAR Cup driver in 2018? I think that was Danica's last
start, yeah.
So it's exciting. Catherine has over 2 decades of racing experience. She has almost 50 IndyCar starts. She's the fastest woman Indy 500 qualifier, I should say, fastest speed. I think it was 2:31 off the top of my head. I'm trying to think there's so many things going on in my mind right now just about her and her racing career, and it's just so exciting. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think she's ready for a start. I mean, when you have experience, I think she's been racing cars longer than you and I have even been on the planet. So it's pretty cool to see her get a shot at the cup level. But it does surprise me that it's kind of random. Like, I don't know about you. I don't know if you want to touch on that, but kind of you would think there was going to be hype around it. Like, oh, there's going to be breaking news. There's going to be a woman NASCAR driver again in the Cup Series. But this kind of just came out of the blue, and it was like, yeah, I'm just a racing Phoenix in the Cup Series. Like, that's pretty awesome. But I feel like there should have been more hype about it. But I don't know what your takeaways are.
Yeah, it's funny, Matthew, because when we do these open segments to start the show, it's normally because, I've got really strong feelings on something that's going on in the sport, and I, want to have this outlet to share it. But, today I can't help but feel a little bit conflicted about this. Not because I don't think Catherine Legge is ready. I think, like you said, she's got a ton of racing experience, but I look at her NASCAR and stock car resume specifically, and Bob Pockrass already confirmed that she's approved to run. NASCAR cited her Indianapolis 500 experience in the last couple of years, and also doing the ARCA race at Daytona. I think that played no small role in her getting the green light to do this. But just looking at her stats here, 5 Xfinity Series starts, obviously the ARCA race at Daytona earlier this year. And I can't help but think back to the fact that, like you said, Danica Patrick, the 2018 Daytona 500, it's the last time we've had a female driver in the Cup Series, but it shouldn't have been. Jennifer Jo Cobb was supposed to make her Cup Series debut for Rick Ware Racing at Talladega in 2021. NASCAR didn't approve that. And Jennifer Jo Cobb, again, say what you will about what happened in the fall Truck Series race that year. I will still stand by my opinion that NASCAR has approved far more controversial things in the past when it comes to drivers making a Cup Series debut. I understand Jennifer Jo Cobb does not have the resume necessarily of a bunch of wins and championships that would make her qualified in the eyes of some people to run a Cup Series race, but she has the experience. She had been racing in the National Series for a decade and a half at that point, and she was the highest finishing female Truck Series driver for 9 years, and that was a race that took place at Daytona on a super speedway. So I saw no reason. If it had been the playoff Cup race at Talladega, maybe that's a different story because there's higher stakes. And if this for Catherine Legge were the championship race at Phoenix, maybe it's a different story because there's higher stakes on the line for other drivers in the field. But the fact that it's a spring race before the playoffs, everybody's got to start somewhere. So I have absolutely no problem. And like you, Matthew, I'm actually very excited. I think Catherine Legge is deserving of this opportunity. I don't expect her to win. Obviously, it's an open car and it's a Cup debut for somebody who still doesn't have a ton of NASCAR National Series experience. So I think for her, it's just going to be about going out there and gaining that experience and running the best that she can given the equipment that she's in. But I think she's a more than competent enough driver to warrant a start like this. But having said that, it is hard not to think back to a few years ago, and it still leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth that we never got that Cup Series start from Jennifer Jo Cobb. And I don't know. I know Rick Ware's running that open car for Corey LaJoie this year. Maybe there would be a track where she would be approved to run. I still feel like NASCAR owes her the opportunity to run a Cup race before she decides to hang up the helmet for good. But in the meantime, for Catherine Legge here, I'm excited for her to get this opportunity. And it is nice to have a female driver back behind the wheel of a Cup Series car again, even if it is just for one race here. But I'm with you, Matthew. I couldn't help but think back to the Indy 500 the last couple of years, and obviously everybody's been talking about Kyle Larson doing the double. Wouldn't that be something if Catherine Legge could pull something like that off? Obviously, Kyle's got all the Hendrick and McLaren sponsors and resources. I feel like that would be exponentially harder for somebody like Catherine Legge to pull off with the teams that she's competing for, and the backing that she has in comparison to Larson, I'm sure is a shoestring budget. But it's good to see her in the Cup Series nonetheless, and I wish her nothing but the best this upcoming weekend in Phoenix.
Oh, no, without a doubt. It's a lot of it is sponsorship. So for her, it must mean a lot to her personally. I don't know if anyone has asked her, and yes, a day in the life, her racing resume is very impressive, like Ben and I allude to. And then Adam saying it's very cool news regarding her. Absolutely, it is. For two points I want to make. One, it's interesting, and I don't know if anyone has asked her about kind of if this race has a sort of meaning, because if you're gathering up, working, getting sponsorship, getting a ride to do just a random NASCAR Cup Series race, the 4th of the season in Phoenix, it's like there's got to be some sort of other meaning to it, unless you just had the money at the right time and you're like, I got to close this deal now and went. So I mean, that's another point. looking forward to that. And the question I have for you too, in terms of, I know we talked about Jennifer Jo Cobb, and then there's been other approvals. I know people were still mad about Mike Wallace. I saw some of those comments about, well, Mike Wallace wasn't approved. I know we had agreements, disagreements, but in terms of, I don't know if this is going to sound correct, in terms of valuing talent from other motorsport, do you think NASCAR takes into consideration how successful a driver is in another sport versus, I know, like the super license? I feel like if you're not in a Formula or an FIA based series, you're almost punished in the sense. Like, I know we talked, it would have been a couple years ago with Colton Herta was willing to leave the top level of American open wheel motorsport to go to a lower series to compete, to try to make his way into Formula One, because he didn't have enough super license points. So I was just going to ask you, do you think NASCAR almost values, not going to say talent, but experience from other sports, other disciplines of motorsports, far more than like the FIA would consider a NASCAR driver or a pretty much IndyCar driver, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think the super license kind of has the opposite problem, right? If NASCAR's, let some questionable things through, I think maybe, nothing against Tanner Berryhill, but I think it was Biker Racing making their Cup debut again, like at Phoenix, which was the penultimate race in 2018. I think that was, that's something that I feel like, when you consider the grand scheme of the championship and the playoffs, maybe that's something that should have happened again at the spring race or at a different track earlier in the season. But to your point about Colton Herta, I think that was a situation where a driver was qualified to potentially make that switch. AlphaTauri seemed to want him, and yet because of this arbitrary super license system, which is designed to keep drivers who are unqualified from just jumping right into Formula One, and you have drivers like Lance Stroll whose credentials have come under question in recent years, while simultaneously it shuts out Colton Herta, or maybe a driver from a series like NASCAR Cup, that is a championship caliber driver, who I don't think would be a championship caliber driver if you just plopped him into an F1 car right away, but would certainly be a skillful race car driver that would have the capabilities of picking up that talent and learning it in single seaters. I just feel like that kind of, like I said, it's the opposite issue there, where you risk shutting out a driver that would be otherwise qualified, but they just don't have enough marks on their super license card, so to speak, to make that transition over to Formula One. So, yeah, I would say I think NASCAR's system is probably preferable. I'd rather have a few slip through the cracks that shouldn't be, as opposed to what we see in F1 with Colton Herta and everything. But again, you know what? And I saw, I don't know if you're referring to Brett Griffin's tweet from the Couch Racer shop account. I think he basically said Mike Wallace would lap her in her backup car, which I think is just, it's kind of ridiculous and pathetic that he has nothing better to do with his time than tweet that from not really anonymous account. I mean, everybody knows who's running that account. It's obviously Brett, but I listen, I will grant him that I think Mike Wallace should have at least been given the opportunity. I think Mike was one of the best in the draft when he was racing. I know he hasn't raced in several years. He's 65 years old, I think. So, I think that, again, but that we had this discussion when that was happening last month. I think that's more of an indictment on the current schedule we have. The fact that we're only just this year brought back a practice session before we sent the cars out for qualifying. I think if Mike had been given the opportunity and gone out there and proven that he, basic competency levels in a test session or a practice session, or maybe he could have done what Elliot Castroneves did and just run the ARCA race as a refresher. Like, I feel like there were workarounds to that. So again, it's not a perfect system by any means. I think it is flawed. We saw it with Mike Wallace this year. We saw it with Jennifer Jo Cobb in the past. There's you got to draw the line somewhere. It's going to be controversial when somebody doesn't get approved, but there are ones that I think have slipped through the cracks that probably shouldn't have. There are also ones that I think probably would have been okay that they've denied here. So, but Catherine Legg, looking at this particular instance here, like I said, doesn't have a ton of NASCAR National Series starts, but she's got a lot of sports car starts, and she's gone fast at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, like you mentioned, Matthew, the fastest woman ever at IMS. I forget if that was last year or a couple of years ago. I know the rules package on the Indy cars are getting up over. You basically have to go 230 or 231 now to make it into the fastest 33. So, I think in this particular instance, like I said, I don't have a problem with it at all. But it does make you think back to Jennifer Jo Cobb, though, and bring back some bad memories from that whole deal. So, we'll see how it goes, though. I'm excited for Phoenix.
Oh, me too, without a doubt. Looking forward to it.
All right. Well, looking ahead to Phoenix, let's look back to this weekend here at COTA. And before we get into the Xfinity Series recap, Matthew, I know this was a big talking point going into the weekend. We ran the short course layout this year. We kind of cut the track in, I guess, not quite half, so to speak, but we took that. I think Brad Perez deemed it the Mario Kart kind of shortcut on the short course layout for COTA. So before I give my thoughts, I want to get your reaction. I know that this was highly controversial. A lot of fans weren't happy that NASCAR wasn't using the full layout, but what did you think, having gotten to see what we saw this weekend from Cup and Xfinity? Do you think that this layout worked, and should NASCAR stick with it, or should we go back to the full layout next year?
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking to myself, because I've been very open in our Slack group chat, and then when we had group me, I think COTA is one of my favorite motorsports tracks in general, just because, I mean, the amount of disciplines that go there, MotoGP, F1. I know supercars ran there way back when. I know if Adam's still watching, he'd be able to tell us about that. And it's just so cool to watch as a motorsports fan. So I was not really very excited to see that they were changing the course, because I think the product we've seen, from whether it was Reddick's win, Byron's win last year, even I know Chase Elliott's win, that was a terrible start with the horrible rain, and then obviously Chastain's first career Cup win came there. It was exciting, but I got to tell you, Ben, I mean, to see the short course, I'm pro short course when it came to what they were able to accomplish. There were more laps, about the same amount of distance, though. But when you think from a fan perspective, you see the cars more often now on a shorter course. I don't know if it's 50% more, but you can actually see better versus, I don't know what the distance is off the top of my head, but they dropped it significantly. So from going from like this to this, and then more laps, it's just the racing product, I think, still overachieved, whether it was at the Cup level. I mean, what other road course are you going to see a 4-car battle for the lead with 5 laps to go? You really don't see it. I was at Watkins Glen this past year, and you saw SVG in the Cup race against Chris Buescher, and that was really it. There wasn't a 4 or 5 driver battle for the lead there either. So for the COTA, I mean, I think they were both great. If NASCAR goes back, am I going to be mad? No. But at the same time, it's like, now you found something. This is your 5th time racing here. You found something. I say you stick with it. And I think the fans, a lot of them are going to say the same thing about it. And there's also, I guess, when you look at like caution laps, they're not as long. They don't drag out as much. You're just constantly, there's not room to sit around and relax. You're watching the racing nonstop. So that's what I liked about it. The only con, though, I think there was less passing zones, I would say, but the drivers found new ways to make passes, whether it was just the bump and run or whatever Denny Hamlin accidentally did to Austin Dillon in the Cup race. So he got around him technically, but I guess that was a little payback from Richmond. But that's my thoughts. I think I like the short course. I like them both, but for NASCAR, I think the short course definitely exceeded expectations.
Yeah, the full course is 3.426 miles. The short course for NASCAR used this weekend 2.4 on the dot. So just a little more than a mile in length that they cut out. But I got to tell you, when I first heard the news, I was a little disappointed, because I thought, why can't we use, if we're the top level? I mean, certainly for the Cup Series at the very least, the top echelon of stock car racing in the world, why can't we use the full layout? But then I thought back to the 2 road courses that have been mainstays on the Cup Series schedule for years here. I know we've gone to, Road America a couple times. That's a 4-mile course. I know we did the Indy road course, the Daytona road course, the Charlotte Roval, obviously. We've done a lot of these infield road courses in recent years. But thinking to Sonoma and Watkins Glen, a couple years ago, we tried the carousel at Sonoma again. And after a couple of years, we said, you know what? Maybe we don't need to do that. Let's go back to what worked for many years and start using the short chute again and cutting the carousel out. I know Tony Stewart raved about the boot when he did the seat swap with Lewis Hamilton. I understand why NASCAR fans would like to see the boot tried at least once, and I'd be open to trying it once. But I have a feeling if we tried it, we might get an okay race, but I think we would probably look back at some of the fantastic races that we've seen. I mean, just last year in particular, I think is a good example of that, with Chris Buescher and SVG going back and forth. And we realize, you know what, maybe it's best that we don't do a boot. I mean, we just cut that short chute and go on that back straightaway and, set that up for a couple more corners coming down the front stretch to the checkered flag. I think that's the best layout for stock cars, for NASCAR Cup Series cars in particular. So when I thought of it in light of those two racetracks and thinking, the shorter courses seem to be the way to go over there, let's give this a chance at COTA and see how it goes. And it's very hard to argue against it, Matthew. I think, like you were saying, your point, the finish to the Cup race in particular, I thought was absolutely phenomenal. I thought it was some of the best road course racing we've seen in the next gen era. So I think and I think Bob Pockler said the same thing. Obviously, he was covering IndyCar for Fox this weekend. It was their first race with that new deal, so he wasn't at the track this weekend for COTA. But he said, just observing it from afar, he would be happy to keep the short course around for next year. So I think that, I always try to take a wait and see kind of approach here with these sorts of things. I don't want to judge a book by its cover. I want to see the changes in action before I judge too harshly. And I got to say, I think the short course won me over. I would be happy to see it continue to be used in 2026 and beyond for NASCAR.
Oh, yeah. I mean, me too. It's funny. I know you mentioned the short course and long course, and it reminded me, and then Adam says, I personally love the short course. See, I agree. I don't know. Did supercars, when they ran here way back when, did they run the long course or the short course? I can't remember that off the top of my head. But what I was getting to is, I have my steering wheel behind me, my little racing, playing Gran Turismo. And I remember a lot of the drivers, too, have that muscle memory, right, about like going to Watkins Glen. And the guys who have been doing it since, gosh, like a Brad Keselowski or a Kyle Busch, they've been racing there for over a decade now at this point. So for them, if they just randomly added that, I know one time I accidentally did a Super Formula race at the long Watkins Glen course, not the one NASCAR did. Ooh, I went right off the track. I was not prepared for that one because it just, I know I'm nowhere near any of them, obviously, but I'm just saying from that like perspective. The long course, though, it is longer and it's a shorter race, but I think NASCAR has a great product when it comes to shorter road courses, and I know one of them is Portland. I know the Xfinity Series races there. ARCA West, I believe, does. Oh, Joe, fun fact. Shorter road course like Portland. Yeah, and I know Formula E was there last year, and I think that's one of the best road courses. I would love to see Cup go there. I don't know why they wouldn't, but then I do know why, because they have 7 other road courses on the schedule in the NASCAR Cup Series. So I think that's a fun one. I think short road courses specifically are better NASCAR products. But when you go to like a Formula One or maybe even an IndyCar, IMSA, I feel like you lean more towards a longer style of, I guess, a road course. Like I wasn't a fan of the Indy road course in NASCAR, but I think it does well in IndyCar.
Yeah, I got to say, I think that, and I think we've talked about this on the show before, I think that the Charlotte Roval was a temporary solution. We had contracts in with these tracks. We couldn't add tracks that we, have since added in 2018. So we decided, hey, we go to Charlotte twice a year. Why don't we take the infield road course and make that its second date? Now enough time has passed that we've renegotiated with the tracks. We've added a lot of new tracks to the schedule, and we have more opportunity to do that. I think, we slightly shorter contracts allow for the schedule to change more year to year, which is what we've seen in recent years. I don't know. I think it's a perfect time to maybe take that infield road course off the schedule and maybe give that date, maybe not give that exact date, but give that opening to a track like Portland, get the Cup Series into the Pacific Northwest market and the West Coast market a little bit too. I think that, Portland would be a great fit for the Cup Series schedule. Obviously, I think we're a little bit biased here at Grid Network since that's our founder's home track. And we could certainly, go to that track and cover it on site. But yeah, I think that, just again, even trying to look at it objectively, Portland is a great option. But I don't know. I'm sure some people will start banging the drum for Road Atlanta as well. There are plenty of great road courses in this country. Mid Ohio, maybe I don't see why Mid Ohio couldn't host a Cup race. That's one that has had some great races in Xfinity and trucks before. So yeah, you never know how the schedule is going to turn out here. But I think in terms of looking at COTA individually, short course absolutely a success, and like I said, would welcome seeing it again in the future.
Yeah, I personally missed the Daytona road course. I know a lot of people probably weren't happy with that, just by the way it was. You go to the 500, then you stay there, and then they did the road course. I know that was, I believe, Ty Gibbs' first career Xfinity win in his first car. So that was exciting.
Yeah, and but that was also a different, like that was like coming out of the pandemic, and I think Florida was one of the states where the rules were a little bit more relaxed, so it made more sense to go to Daytona and then stay there a second week, and then I think Homestead was the week after that. So, obviously travel restrictions made that a little bit more challenging in that era. So I think again, kind of a temporary solution. And I'm with you, Matthew. I don't think the races were particularly awful or anything. And I still, I kind of hold the philosophy. I guess Daytona would probably be the exception because the summer race, has a history of the Firecracker 400 and everything too. But I've always said, listen, 28 to 32 races at 28 to 32 unique tracks. I don't know if there's any track, again, maybe Daytona being the one exception where we need to go twice a year. And if we do, maybe you would run the road course, or you would, pour dirt over Bristol or something to make it, that much more unique. I think would be ideal there. But again, I'm sure some people would, say, look at what we just did with Bristol last year and taking the dirt off, and we got a great spring race and then not so good night race here. So I understand that there are certainly variables you can mess with there as well. But, the schedule is never going to be completely 100% how I like it. And I've got to recognize that and take what we can get here. They've for all the flaws that, NASCAR's had from a business or marketing standpoint in the last 20 years or so, I think the schedule has been one of their biggest victories that they can take. And, we've done a great job adding some new venues for us over the last several years, COTA being one of them. So another great race weekend here, and great decision, I think, to move on to the short course layout.
Definitely.
All right, well, let's move on. Let's talk about the race weekend here. COTA, obviously, you heard the Cup recap on the wrap-up show yesterday. Let's pull out the Xfinity Series results here, and I think not much of a surprise at the front. Connor Zilisch had to work quite a bit to get there. He was kind of up and down all weekend. Obviously finished in last in the Cup race in his debut, unfortunately, but he was the second highest betting odds, I believe, to win the Cup race, according to some books, heading into the weekend, which tells you a lot about the hype surrounding this young man as he was preparing to make his Cup Series debut. And then in the Xfinity Series race, like he did last year at Watkins Glen, he took the checkered flag here once again as he kicks off his 2025 campaign in style here. So, Matthew, I feel like a phrase that has gotten quite overused over the years is the next Jeff Gordon, right? They once thought Casey Atwood was going to be the next Jeff Gordon. His career didn't pan out that way, unfortunately. A lot of drivers, William Byron being him in 24, Chase Elliott being him in 24, those guys have gone on to have quite a bit of success and won races, competed for championships. Elliott's won a championship in his case. But when you look at Connor Zilisch, you look at the connections that he has now racing at Junior Motorsports. Obviously, Rick Hendrick, a minority owner over at that program. Do you think Connor Zilisch could truly be the next driver to win multiple championships, maybe as many as 70, 80 Cup races? Is the hype surrounding him justified here at only 18 years old?
Is the hype there? Absolutely. Do I think he's going to be the next superstar? Yeah, I absolutely do. But in terms of, I guess we have to define it. Do I think he's going to end up winning? Do I think any driver currently on the grid right now is going to even come close to what Kyle Busch's Cup total is right now at 63-ish? No, I don't believe so. It's just by the way the car's shifting, and then there's a lot more talent, I feel. I think you can look at the Cup Series grid and say there's probably 25 guys, give or take, that can go out there and win at least one race a season, which I think's phenomenal. But, looking at Connor Zilisch, he's so successful. He's only 18 years old. That's appalling to me. You get reminded that you didn't do as much as you want to do in life when you see somebody that young being as successful and humble. Don't get me wrong. There's not one moment I've seen Connor Zilisch not be very humble about how incredible this kid is racing, especially Red Bull. So Joey Logano was a sliced bread. I can make a joke with you. Maybe I don't have a Red Bull can, but maybe he's the next Baja Blast, right? Just because he's truly an incredible talent. See, you're smart. See, no. I can't do the regular. I try to stick to the diet and zero stuff. But in terms of Zilisch, I was at his first Watkins Glen race for my job at Diorio Foods Incorporated. I won at a trade show. I won tickets for the whole weekend. So I got to go see ARCA, which he won the ARCA race. I got to go see the Xfinity, and his first career starts on pole, wins the race. Now, talk about crowd noise. They were excited to see that happen. And then I saw, obviously, Chris Buescher, best SVG. But, Zilisch, just his resume speaks for himself. He's 24 Hours of Daytona winner. the 12 Hours of Sebring winner, whether it's the LMP2. I know he's won a few ARCA races. It's just so funny to me that a lot of people don't realize. I mean, Zilisch has kind of been in the U.S. for a little bit now, and he's been racing in America doing stuff. There's a fun fact about Connor Zilisch. I assume you know, but I don't know if the viewers know. Did you know Connor Zilisch won a car store race a couple of years ago in 2023, his first pretty much late model season? I don't know if you knew that, Ben. Do you know he was affiliated with a team that's actually in the NASCAR Truck Series as well? So I don't know if people know that, but Connor Zilisch actually raced late models for Rackley War and won a race in the number 25 late model for Rackley War. And funny enough, his teammate was Dawson Sutton, who's now the Truck Series driver for Rackley War. And you can just see it's like Zilisch has been around for a couple of years, but he was so young that there's a lot of young talent out there. But this kid is one of those that took off and has truly become the next superstar. And he's, of the drivers that are under 20, there's no reason why he's not the number one prospect in all of motorsport for what he can do. So, and Chevrolet, also, it's going to be harder for him to fail. And I don't mean to say that like in a negative way, but when you have Red Bull backing, when you have great support system with Trackhouse, with Junior Motorsports, the Hendrick connection, it's like it's going to be very hard for him to kind of, unless something goes wrong. But in terms of, he's got all the equipment now, he can just go out and prove how incredible he is as a talent. And then do we see him in Cup next year? Is that too early? I mean, we don't know. I know Ty Gibbs got bumped up the Cup, who he's an Xfinity champion, ARCA champion, hasn't won yet, and he's kind of on a down stretch. So it's like, are they moving Zilisch up too fast? Where's he going to go? Is he going to take over Suarez's ride? Is there going to be room at Hendrick Motorsports in a couple of years? Does he stay with Chevrolet? It's like, I don't know. Red Bull has a lot of teams going to Ford. Does Trackhouse make the move to Ford? Does Zilisch go with them? Just kind of throwing out random stuff here, Ben. I apologize. But I think Zilisch is going to be the next superstar. There's just a lot going on. I'm more excited for silly season, I think, just to see what happens with these guys. But yeah, Zilisch, I would say he's definitely the next superstar in the making. And I think Ty Gibbs was the one previously. And I still think Corey Heim, too, on the truck side is going to be a Cup champion someday. It's just he's got to get into Cup first.
Yeah, well, he's making progress on that front, I think, with this new deal with 2311. But again, just looking at Zilisch's stats here, to your point, Matthew, a broken sway bar, he almost pulled it off anyway. He was one corner away at Watkins Glen in 2023 from winning his ARCA debut. And then he won his next 4 ARCA races last year. He was a crash at Bristol away from being the ARCA East champion. Probably should have won that championship fairly handily over William Sawalich. Of course, some unfortunate circumstances took him out of the combo race that was the season finale for ARCA East. But, probably should have that box ticked on his resume. But I said it multiple times last year. This kid is too good for ARCA. He should already be running trucks or Xfinity or be up, in the National Series. Pole at COTA in the Truck Series race last year, finished 4th in that one. Again, had a lot of kind of up and down circumstances that had him have to come back from the back of the pack to the front there and ended up getting a top 5 out of it. And then, of course, you were there, like you mentioned. He won his Xfinity Series debut last year, as did Ty Gibbs, Daytona Road Course a few years prior to that. And then picking up the win at COTA this weekend. Now, again, like I mentioned, I think it was a bit of a stretch, a bit of overhype to say second best odds to win the Cup Series race in his debut. We hadn't seen anybody do that for 60 years. It was ironically, I think, the only guy that was ahead of him on that list in Shane Van Gisbergen, doing that in Chicago a couple of years ago. So I think that I didn't, again, expect Connor Zilisch to win this weekend. I expected him to finish higher than 37th, which I think he would have had he not had that incident take him out. But, like you said, I mean, there's so many superlatives that you can use for this young man and the talent that he's shown here. Again, you don't want to rush him. You don't want to overhype him. We'll see how he does this year. Now, if he wins 10 Xfinity races and runs away with the title, maybe Trackhouse has some tough decisions to make, especially if Daniel Suarez, say, doesn't win in the Cup Series this year or doesn't run particularly well. Maybe you would say, he's backed by Red Bull. He's got the hype and the talent and the sponsorship surrounding him. Maybe, you don't want to waste that opportunity or lose him to a rival team or something. Maybe Trackhouse would want to sign him and lock him up into their Cup Series program for the next few years. We'll have to wait and see how this season goes. But I think, and it's, again, like I said, it's not just the road courses. He was 4th in his second race at Kansas last year, and then 4th of the season finale at Phoenix. So, the talent is there, regardless of the track type, I think. And he's only going to continue to get better from here. Now, again, you want to talk about moving up too quickly. I think Joey Logano is probably the best example of that, of somebody that had all this hype, in the lower levels, won, I think, only his 3rd nationwide race of the time, and then Gibbs basically put him straight to Cup when Tony Stewart left. And there were some growing pains. I know he got that rain-shortened win New Hampshire, but, only won 2 races in the 4 years he was at Gibbs, and then ended up getting released from that contract, and then made a name for himself at Penske. He's done just fine, won a few championships in the years since then, and 30-plus Cup races. He'll be on his way to the Hall of Fame one day, no doubt. But, to your point, Matthew, as well, I think, when people talk about the next Jeff Gordon, the next Jimmy Johnson, those are guys that have win totals in the 80s and 90s. You brought up Kyle Busch at 63. I know I would like to think he's still going to add to that. He came very close this weekend as well. I think he's going to break that winless streak at some point. But, I don't know if he's going to get much past 70 at this point in his career. And then thinking about guys like, Kyle Larson, or maybe the future, here with guys like Zilisch, I think even Busch's total, forget reaching, Jeff Gordon's and Jimmy Johnson's of the world. I think even matching the Kyle Busch's and Kevin Harvick's of the world is going to be tougher in this era that we're in. There's just so many good young names coming up through the ranks, and so many good teams in the Cup Series. I think the parity is higher than it's ever been here as well. So certainly lots to keep an eye on here. But in the meantime, Connor Zilisch making quite a name for himself. Again, only at 18 years old, already a multiple-time winner in the Xfinity Series. And good to see him behind the wheel of a Cup car. And we'll see that a couple more times this year. Hopefully it goes a little bit better for him in future Cup starts than it did this weekend. But as for the Xfinity Series race, doesn't have to worry about the playoffs anymore. He's locked into that, and very strong showing from him this weekend, I think, as we all expected.
Oh, no, without a doubt. And I think just to touch on your point really quickly about, I think what happens is we build a lot of hype around these young drivers who absolutely kill it. Like, for example, Adams says Zilisch will win a Cup Series title. It's interesting because it's like every time I talk on Grid, I mention there's a lot of guys in my head who I think will be Cup champions in this sport. I think Corey Heim, I think Ty Gibbs. But it's like Ty Gibbs has had probably the worst growing pains the last probably 10, 15 races. I think he has like 2 top 30 finishes. And like A Day in the Life says, yeah, he's behind Jimmy Johnson still in points. And Jimmy Johnson ran just the Daytona 500. And, I mean, he's ahead of his teammate Chase Briscoe. I mean, you and I are too. So everyone in the comments are as well. But I think we build a lot of hype into these guys and expect them to come up and win almost immediately. But you see some of the best drivers in this sport now, whether it's Chase Elliott, whether it's Kyle Larson, guys that took probably 90-ish, 95 to 100 races to finally get it done. I believe, is it Jackson Todd? One of our Grid Network contributors has
100 starts. Yeah, that's kind of the magic.
Yeah, so
number
for around there. So Ty Gibbs is approaching there, but he's not giving us too much confidence at the moment. But I think for Zilisch, is it too early to say he's a superstar? No, I think he will be. But in terms of, are people going to be mad when he's 21 years old? He might only have 2 or 3 wins. They're going to be mad, but they have to realize that Joey Logano is going to be a Hall of Famer. He's a 3-time champion. It took him a while to get up to 3-4 wins. It even took him leaving the team that groomed him to become that superstar. I watched Joey Logano, I believe it was a K&N series back when I was 6 or 7 years old. This kid who was sliced bread, driving the number, I believe it was 18 for Joe Gibbs Racing. And he led 1 lap at Adirondack Speedway up in New York, and it was the final lap, and he won that race. And I believe it was one of his last ever wins in that series. And it's like that kid had all the talent in the world, went all the way up the Cup, and it's almost like he was rushed, didn't get it done. People are like, is he really sliced bread? And now it's 3-time champion Joey Logano. So we'll see with Zilisch, pretty much. Sorry to make that longer point, but
no, all good. All good. I'm sorry if you guys could hear that. The radiator kicked in, like we mentioned at the start. The warmer temperatures are coming, but we do still need heat in the house. So apologies if that came through on the mic here. But before we move on, there's been a little bit of beef on social media here the last couple of days, and I feel like maybe we should highlight it here just real quick before we move on to Indy next. The question that I just have to ask myself, Matthew, is what is going on with Chris Wright? Obviously, we had that incident at the Daytona race where he blamed his spotter for not hitting the brakes and cleaning out some cars on their way into the pits. And I think that feud was reignited with Josh Bilicki this weekend. I'll just read some tweets out here. I apologize, I didn't save them, so I can't display them here. I think Chris has actually deleted his at this point anyway. But Bilicki says, following the COTA race, really fast car, not much to show for it. Started at the rear of the field after we had to fix a few issues after qualifying. Top 12 pace all day, but a pit road speeding penalty at the end of stage 2 set us back. We were charging forward until the 5 car spun right in front of us and got into me again, costing us about 25 seconds. Never got the caution we needed to recover fully. Rebounded to finish P22, but had the speed for much more on to Phoenix. Then Chris Wright comes in and responds and says, got loose outside of you and you finished me off. Bilicki comes back and says, dude, it's embarrassing that you don't even know what happened. I was behind you. You were on the inside of a 35 car. He was passing you on the outside. And you stepped on your eggplant emoji. You can fill in the blank there. Again, and spun all on your own without me touching you. I had nowhere to go, and you hit me as you spun around. I tried giving you the benefit of the doubt after Daytona, but it's honestly getting out of hand. Maybe you should go back to being a gentleman driver in IMSA, where you can race doctors and dentists in LMP3. Matthew, what are your thoughts on this beef that we seem to have here between Bilicki and Wright in the Xfinity Series?
Talk about the what's the beef 301 or whatever that Daytona race was. Gosh,
it's what's for dinner, I think was the tagline.
Yeah, right. And there was a beef one in there. I just combined them. But as I personally don't like, it's weird that this is all happening. And, you know, I mean, Chris Wright, it is kind of humorous to blame the spotter. I don't know if he just said that out of the blue or if he really stuck by it. But then just going on social media and beefing is just kind of childish. It is. And working with drivers, the last thing you want to see is a driver go out there. You're a brand in motorsport, and to go out there and just say to another driver, you stepped on your eggplant emoji, and then another one blaming someone else. It's like, you don't want to see that at all. Sponsors don't want to see that. I don't care if Chris Wright, I know he has he's had a long time sponsorship. I think it's a bank or something like that. And then obviously Insurance King with Josh Bilicki's been around quite a while, from the longest I can remember. But it's like you still don't want to associate the people that help you in your racing career with Twitter beef or X beef, whatever we call it now. I don't know what's going on with Chris Wright. Unfortunately, his racing resume, at least since he switched to stock cars, has not shown anything. I took a note here. Let me see where. Yeah, he has 64 Xfinity and truck races and not a single top 10. And it's like, but in ARCA though, his 35 ARCA races, 23 top 10s. So I don't know if this is something where Chris Wright, if he wants to gain some more confidence, I recommend go back to ARCA, get some couple good races and go trucks, do some one-offs, and then come back up. But I mentioned Corey LaJoie, I know, once said, and he said even that he'd rather take as many cup races as he can or higher level series than have to go back down in front of 12 people to race. But in terms of Chris Wright, he came from, I know, U.S. Legend Cars, and that's where he made his name. And besides going to racing in like IMSA and open wheel, or kind of like LMP cars prototype, if you know what I mean. So maybe Chris Wright, get a couple legend car races under your belt again, regain that confidence. I've heard from many drivers that legend cars are actually some of the hardest to drive in racing, which is very weird to think because you don't think they are. But there's a reason why guys like Bubba Wallace still race legend cars to this day. There's why guys like Kevin Harvick has Keelan Harvick in legend cars, because they're hard and you got to learn. So, but if you want to go back down, gain your confidence against something that you made a name for yourself in, someone like Chris Wright, maybe do a couple legend car races before you're an ARCA race, maybe after this year. So obviously you got the full-time Xfinity deal, do that. But you hate to see a driver down, and you can tell when a driver is upset, they might act out a little more. I mean, I think he's like 30. He's a grown man. But still, like when you're not doing well, whether it's at home, like us, I'm talking you and I, if we're not having a good day, it's like you're down on yourself, stuff like that. You want to do something that will build your confidence back up, make you happier. I think for Chris Wright, that's doing a couple ARCA races, maybe throw some money in a late model race, legend car race, just do something, because you don't really want to act like that on social. And it's only been 3 weeks, Ben, and you've already seen so much acknowledgement of social media and Chris Wright and stuff going on. And I know he's deleted a lot of it now, but there's always screenshots if people are interested in them. But that's kind of my thing, is I think for him, get your confidence back. I mean, there's a reason why you're racing, is because you can actually race. You have the sponsorship. Just because you don't have the wins doesn't mean you're not a good race car driver. So for him, I think he's just got to get his confidence back, because what's going on is it's upsetting, honestly, to see.
Yeah. Well, and in the court of public opinion, it was one of the biggest ratios I've ever seen on social media. I know that word is tiresome sometimes on X/Twitter, but Wright's response got 9 likes. Bilicki's reply to him directly below it got 555 at the time that this screenshot was taken here. So that shows you where the court of public opinion stands, I guess. But yeah, Matthew, the first time that I remember hearing Chris Wright's name was right after the racing season resumed in 2020 from the pandemic, and Chris Wright did these 2 ARCA West starts at Utah Motorsports Campus, and I believe he finished 2nd and 3rd in those races. And I thought, okay, this kid seems like he could have some potential here. But like you mentioned, his national series starts, Xfinity and trucks, have not gone so well. He did run full time in ARCA last year for Venturini, didn't win a race, and there was no full timer in last season's ARCA Menard Series season that won a race, which was kind of a weird situation there, because we had the 18 and the 28 with Zilisch and Zilisch mostly taking all those wins. But even then, you had some other drivers stepping into those cars and part-timers winning races. But Chris Wright did finish 3rd in the standings. He did have a handful of top 5s. I would caution people when they look at the top 10 stats in ARCA, because we frequently see much lower car counts there. And of course, we can't compare the resources that the Venturinis of the world have compared to the independents that run that series. So quite frankly, if you're in a Venturini car in ARCA, you should be getting a top 10, probably even a top 5 if we're being honest. But when, again, you look at the starts of the season, this is the 2nd time now in 3 races that he's come together with Bilicki in particular. And, I'm sure he's not the only one that's grown tired of his antics here. So, again, I don't want to wish any ill will on Chris Wright. I hope that he gets this situation figured out and he can start picking up his performance a little bit. But, it's one thing to make mistakes out on track. It's another thing not to read the room and to run your mouth on social media. And so that's where, I hope he's got a team at Our Motorsports that can kind of bring him back to reality here a little bit and get him to maybe not say everything that comes to his mind on his Twitter account before it leads to situations like this in the future.
Yeah, you only see guys like maybe Kyle Busch back when he was with Joe Gibbs and had M&Ms locked up forever, Mars specifically. You only really see them kind of get away with being like that on like social media. You don't really think of like a driver like Chris Wright to have that same type of, I don't want to say chip on the shoulder, but letting your frustrations get the best of you. I think he can do it. Like, I think he has a chance. I think he needs to get that confidence back, like I mentioned in circles probably 47 times in the last 30 seconds. But I think he's just got to get that confidence back. But
yeah, no doubt.
We'll see.
All right, a couple comments here, and then we'll move on. Denver Thurston saying, I think Connor Zilisch is an SVG, disciple SVG, having an influence on his racing. Yeah, absolutely, with them being together at Trackhouse, I think. And again, the Red Bull connection here in A Day in the Life, asking any insight on the Zilisch and Red Bull connection, why they sponsored him. Matthew, you can chime in if you have any insider information, so to speak. As far as I know, it was a personal kind of endorsement deal that they signed last year to sponsor him, and he's obviously brought that over to Trackhouse this year. And it's great to see the Red Bull brand back on a NASCAR stock car. I can tell you that much. I wonder how much those diecasts are going to be worth in 10 to 15 years if the Allmendinger and Vickers and Scott Speed ones from back in the day are any indication. But it's great to have that brand back in our sport for sure.
Oh, no, without a doubt. And I'm pretty sure you got at least 1 or 2 of those. I know I've mentioned with our collections. I'm very jealous of that. That's one of my prime, one day, hopefully, even in the KCK number 4. But anyway, I think for Red Bull, I think it was just something, too. It's like they realized how talented this young kid is. And obviously, we all joked because Grid Network's one of the few, I think, out there on YouTube for those watching right now that have actually covered supercars in terms of not only just covering North American motorsport like NASCAR, but also going to supercars, Formula E, so on and so forth. So we knew Red Bull, we knew SVG, and we are so excited to finally see SVG bring Red Bull to the sport, whether it was on his helmet when he won at Chicago, so on and so forth. But for them, the Trackhouse, I think, has a big part of the reason why Zilisch got that Red Bull connection. I mean, I don't really have any insider information. I just know it was like August, I think, of last year when he signed as a Red Bull driver as a
Like that.
I think he was 17 or now he's 18. So I wonder if it was right after he turned 18. But, that's awesome. It really is awesome to have a big, huge company like that, especially Red Bull, come back to NASCAR. A lot of people wanted it. Monster Energy kind of took over the whole energy drink branding. But now, I mean, Red Bull's back, and they probably have two of the best road course drivers in the world, you could argue, in terms of was Zilisch in his age group, SVG just being one of the greatest supercars drivers of all time, too. Right in their camp there. So we'll see what happens. And Red Bull's got money everywhere, too. Formula One, big one there. I know Monster does, too, but they're not like Monster Energy F1 team. They're on. Sure. Are they with McLaren now, Ben? You would know.
I think so. Yeah, I feel like Lando and Oscar both have
Monster,
some sort of deal with them. Yeah, and obviously Lewis Hamilton was backed by them for many years. I don't know if that deal's still active. Yeah,
Celsius is coming up.
Celsius I think is the new Ferrari partner. So yeah,
that's gonna be fun to see.
Yeah,
we're gonna have a three-way battle between energy.
Yeah. Well, because Red Bull, obviously, that's going to be interesting to watch for sure.
Man, I love it. Personal branding on the track, like in terms of battling, like when fast food, McDonald's versus Wendy's on track is always fun to see, and then energy drinks and stuff. Kind of have fun with it.
Yeah. All right. One more series we want to cover. We'll give you the rundown real quick. Congratulations to Dennis Hauger on winning the Indy NXT race here at St. Petersburg. Of course, IndyCar kicking off their season this weekend. Brand new TV deal with Fox Sports and FS1, covering all the FS1 and FS2, I should say, covering all the Indy NXT races being live on linear television. I know that's something that American Open Wheel racing fans have been asking for years. But Hauger wins on debut. That's the first time we've seen that in this series since it was still Indy Lights in 2021. Linus Lundqvist accomplished that feat. So I think a lot of people are expecting big things out of Dennis Hauger for the 2025 season, and maybe he'll add his name to the list of champions in this series. Of course, there's going to be a lot of eyes on Hailie Deegan this year as well. We've talked about her a lot on this show throughout her career, obviously coming up through NASCAR trucks and doing about a half season's worth of races in the Xfinity Series last year. She struggled for pace quite a bit this weekend in practice and qualifying, was a couple of seconds off in each of those, but she kept the car clean, finished the last car in the lead lap in 14th place there. Matthew, I don't know if you've gotten a chance to chime in, give your thoughts on what Hailie Deegan is trying to do this season, making this transition over from stock cars to open wheel racing. We saw how difficult it was for a 7-time Cup champion in Jimmy Johnson to do this a few years ago. Deegan's coming over having not experienced the success that she wanted to in the stock car racing world, trying to reinvent herself, give herself a fresh start with her career in Indy NXT in 2025. What are you expecting out of her from this season? And is the same pace maybe an indication that in terms of this season, in terms of results at least, it's kind of going to be a lost year for, not in terms of gaining experience, but in terms of being competitive on the track? That's something we should wait to see for year two.
Gotcha. Do you mind if I touch first on the Hauger part, or do you want me to go back?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
For him too, it's the reason why I say this is one thing I want to shout out Fox, being able to do this, because as someone who's started to follow more and more motorsports as I got older, Indy is like one of the things I just have not watched like ever in my life. But for them to start building this hype, and I know with Dennis Hauger, for example, he's one of those that I've actually heard, like, this kid's going to come in, obviously Formula 3 champion. I know he won like 5 races in F2. So, and he grew up in the racing programs with, I just did some research, Liam Lawson and Jack Doohan, who both with a Red Bull connection. So this kid's got a lot of hype. So does it shock me that he came and won on debut like Lundqvist did in 2021? No, not really. Do I think he's probably going to win the championship? Unless Miles has something to say about it. I think that will be a fun battle with them. I know one of the comments there said something about Miles Rowe. If he doesn't win the championship, what happens? There it is. I don't know. We'll see what happens there, but that's going to be a fun battle in my opinion. But I think a talent like that I believe Dennis is from Norway off the top of my head. So to bring in that to the American series, bringing people who followed him in F3, F2, and to see him just come and absolutely dominate one from pole. So I think he was on pole, yeah, right?
I can confirm that quickly. Yeah, I believe
He was. I
so.
just know he was fast all
Yeah.
weekend. So for him to win on debut was awesome. But looking forward to that. I think he's going to be a big name too when the time comes. Indy the series instead of maybe trying to go back to the FIA series is. But in terms of Hailie Deegan, I mean, I think there's a lot to say about that. I think there's not one person rooting against her. I think everyone wants to see her succeed. But I think she is in for a long season, just like you mentioned, Ben. It's 14 rounds, one's already down. I think she realistically might only have a shot at some of the ovals. I know they go to Nashville at the end of the season, Iowa mid-season, the Gateway, I believe it is, and then I think Milwaukee's like towards the end too, the Milwaukee Mile. So for them, it's like I think she has a shot there, but the lack of pace is concerning because that's a team that I believe is a championship winning team. Maybe not her specific car, but that organization. And they got a lot of rookies on that team. And for her to finish the last car on the lead lap, it's a little worrisome. But I think she's only like 13 days or 12 days older than me. And I'm 23. So it's like she's got time to develop. It's not like it's the end of the world. I was quite surprised, though, that she left NASCAR and tried to try something new. I think she's one of the most marketable figures in all of motorsport. I know like her and Tony Breidinger both were over like the millions and followers and stuff on social media. For her to have Monster Energy still backing her in a lower series like this. So I wish her the best, but I am quite surprised she didn't try to go back down the ARCA, get a couple wins. I know she won 3, I believe it was, in K&N in the West Series. No, she's from the California area. Maybe I thought she would have honestly gone back there and tried to do something there. But hey, if where the money brings her and she wants to go wherever, she's free to do it. It's just I'm not sure what her next step is in her racing career because I know she has a dirt background too. She was karting when she was probably 2.5 years old. I mean, she's been a racer her entire life. So I feel bad that she's in for a long season. I truly think she is, but I guess we're going to see what happens. I think there's some upside to it. I think she brings marketing ability to Indy NXT. I think a lot of people, I was talking to my father, for example, who he's been a big NASCAR guy his whole life, but I get him, he even was texting me, I was at the store. He's like, are you watching this IndyCar race? He's like, wow, this Newgarden guy's doing well, and this Palou guy is incredible. I'm trying to get my dad more, but he's like, oh, I would have watched the Indy next race if I knew Hailie Deegan was in there. So it's like you got to bring more people into the sports. And he's like, it's cool that it's on Fox. I didn't even know this was really a series that was on television. I was like, it wasn't. So you're welcome. So just a long story, I'm sorry to keep talking like that, but I look forward to her season. I think she's got 4 chances to really do something, but other than that, it does worry me, her lack of pace, especially testing, practice, and qualifying, and then even in the race, she was the last car on the lead lap.
Yeah, well, I think we all knew it was going to be a steep learning curve. I've got to admit that the lack of pace in practice and qualifying, I think, was certainly a little bit concerning. But again, it is her first weekend in these cars, and she's going to have a full season to get adjusted to that. So we'll see, how it goes here as we, like you mentioned, we'll have a couple of ovals throughout the season. I wish we had more. That's been a running problem with IndyCar and specifically this series, I should say. Looking at trying to prepare these drivers for the Indianapolis 500, I will continue to bang that drum, bring back the Freedom 100. I think that was the best race that this series had, and it's a shame that that was one of the casualties of the pandemic that we haven't gotten back yet. So we'll continue to fight for that, I guess. But going to be an interesting season for sure. Looking at both front of the grid and the back of the grid as these drivers try to gain experience and continue to move up the ladder here. I think we got some comments in chat while we were talking there. Jamie Chadwick, Damon Life says, I wish that Chadwick had gone to IndyCar. And Humperdinck, good to see another one of our regulars in the chat here going to ELMS was a huge loss. Yeah, I think absolutely a big loss for American open wheel racing. But, we'll see. We wish Chadwick nothing but the best in her career, wherever that takes her as well. And beyond Hailie, this is a stacked Indy NXT field. Yeah, I think there's a lot of talent here for sure. Miles Rowe, again, going to be interesting to keep an eye on him. I don't know that it's necessarily career over if he doesn't win a championship this year, but I think he, at this point in his next career could certainly, wouldn't be surprising based on how his career has progressed to see him take that next step and maybe compete for a championship, if not win it outright. He's obviously got a lot of strong competition from Dennis Hauger in particular, but even if he can finish second or third in championship points by the end of the year, he had a strong fourth place run this weekend. I think that that would still leave him on a solid path for his future for sure. All right. Well, thank you all for sticking with us here. It kind of amazes me. I was thinking to myself, we only had a couple of races to cover this weekend and not a huge news week from that front either. So probably going to be a little bit of a shorter show tonight here. And we've already come up on an hour, but that's the beauty of this show here. We have lively, fun discussions. Thank you all for being so active in the chat room and gives us that opportunity to interact with you all and answer some questions and talk about what's going on in this great sport. So in light of that, Matthew, before we sign off for the night, what was your one shining moment from what you saw in the motorsports world this weekend?
Oh, gosh, there were so many when you think about it. Also, Ben probably forgot that I yap and talk in circles, and that's why the show's going on for so long. But one shining moment, it's tough because you want to say Zilisch, there's some obvious ones, but I'm going to say Fox, only strictly for the Indy side of things. I know NASCAR, there was a lot going on. Zilisch obviously is pretty much a superstar in that making, and is a shining star. But just Fox and Fox Sports giving the ability for at least us as Americans to watch the series, and then the graphic packages. I mean, Fox has put so much marketing into a sport that I truly believe could be the best motorsport in America if it gets the right attention, and that's IndyCar and obviously Indy NXT. And I really think just Fox did an incredible job. I'm not going to talk about their NASCAR coverage though, but in terms of what they do with IndyCar and then obviously Indy NXT, I think that was my one shining moment as a person who watches sports and motorsports.
Yeah, I heard great things from the Fox team this weekend. I still need to go back, and I was very busy this weekend. Didn't get a chance to catch the race live, but I did see. We were in the mall. I was hanging out with a couple of friends right before I went to go see the new Captain America movie finally, which has been on my list to do for a while. And one of the sports memorabilia stores had playing on their TV. It was Big Fox. It was the tail end of the IndyCar race, and that's how I found out that Alex Palou had won. So, maybe this new TV deal is going to work out after all. I think people heard Fox and thought of their NASCAR coverage and were like, I don't know how this is going to go. But I think, we have a good team in place. And if they continue to do this and market it the way they have, I think it could be good for the series in the future. And I'll touch on that a little bit more when I give my final thoughts here as we close the show out. In terms of my one shining moment, I want to give a shout out to Blaine Perkins, another driver that came from the ARCA Menard Series West, has been grinding away in the Xfinity Series, did a season of a Truck Series as well, has not had much success. This is only his second top 10 ever and first since 2022. But well done to him and the entire Jordan Anderson Racing team on breaking through this weekend, getting that top 10 finish. And look at some of these names he finished ahead of. Race winners, Sammy Smith, Riley Herbst, Sheldon Creed, somebody who's finished second how many times now, done everything but come into victory lane in this series. So, he beat some heavy hitters there just outside the top 10. So well done to him. And, talking about Chris Wright earlier in the show, maybe this is something that he can look at as, a goal for him to try to emulate, break into that top 10 eventually later on in the year with, ironically enough, Perkins's former team in our motorsports. So that'll give him something to shoot for the rest of this year as well. But for Perkins this weekend, I think that has to be my one shining moment for this show. That is going to do it for us here tonight. So thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode of Grid Encore. Hopefully we're going to have Brandon back next week, but thank you to Tanner and Matthew for filling in the last couple of weeks here. And be sure to follow the Grid Network at Grid Network TV on all our social media platforms, X/Twitter, Threads, or Blue Sky. Pick your microblogging platform. We're on all three of them. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn. Most importantly, subscribe to us right here on YouTube. And if you really liked what you saw tonight, you want to support this channel, support our team here, you can join Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew in investing in the Grid Network to help us expand our coverage and get to the track on a more regular basis throughout 2025 and beyond. You can also become a member through our YouTube channel. directly, or if you'd rather make a one-time contribution, if you're on YouTube, we have the super chat and super thanks features enabled as well, or you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below. Now, taking a look at our upcoming schedule, Grid Tonight will be back this coming Wednesday here in just a couple of days with Kobe, Josh, and Matt, so make sure you tune into that. And then, of course, we will have pre-race and wrap-up coverage this weekend and Encore to follow in 7 days' time, as always. Matthew, thanks again for filling in. Any final thoughts before we sign off for the evening?
Just a fun fact, too, is Blaine Perkins and Chris Wright both came from a similar development program, so it's fun to see them both in Xfinity, and we both talked about them. So that's just a random fun fact. A shout out to him. I know top 10. He definitely, that kid works his butt off, too. So from what I've been able to watch in his young career. So looking forward to that. Obviously, Ben, thank you for having me. I'm very happy I was free tonight. Usually I'm a very busy boy, but this Monday, it's the 20 degrees, one of the warmer days up in central New York. This past couple months, honestly. But yeah, thank you for having me. And then if those who watch the NASCAR Cup Series race, go to gridnetworktv.com. My recap is there. All my recaps are there from, I believe, the whole next gen era, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe 1 year off. So I've been writing for Grid Network now. This is my third year. So if you ever want to see, if you don't recognize the face, at least hopefully you can recognize the writing on the website. So that's my shout out.
Yeah, and thanks again, Matthew. I know you do a lot for our website, so great to have those recaps back for 2025. On the note that you were talking about in your shining moment, I love that Fox is all in. I think it was great to see such a positive reception to their coverage this weekend. I just can't help but wish that IndyCar were in a slightly better place. I know we got those rumors again this weekend that maybe 2027 or 2028 potentially from a new car. You know, we'll see if this charter era works as it's intended. I think, you know, the charter system in NASCAR has been quite heavily flawed. So I have some pretty major concerns myself. I wish we had more ovals. I wish we had clearer voice, excuse me, coming from leadership here. And I just wish the series was in a slightly better place. But in terms of what the network is doing in this new partnership to market this new partnership and market this series, I have to give Fox an A all the way for what they've done so far. Not just this weekend, but in the build-up. I think their social media presence has been fantastic. I think they have a solid booth. It was a little bit iffy on Buxton coming in, but from the highlights I've heard, I think it sounds like he's fitting in nicely and developing chemistry with Townsend Bell and James Hinchcliffe. So looking forward to great things in this new partnership in 2025 and beyond.
No, without it. The meme, too, of in terms of motorsports broadcasting, how Lee Diffie's now technically NBC and NASCAR. Will Buxton went from Formula One to Indy, and then I believe there's Danica's now with both, and then now she's with Formula One. Yeah. So it's like how funny that all worked out there. But yeah, it's exciting for especially IndyCar, though, like you were saying. They can have all the marketing in the world now. We always used to say there is literally not enough IndyCar marketing. It's the most underrated series. Now they have a lot of marketing, but now how does IndyCar become marketable? And I guess we're going to have to see this year how that happens.
Yeah, certainly something to look at for sure, and hopefully they can capitalize on that. All right, thank you all so much for tuning in. For Matthew Bro, for Brandon Crossland, hopefully keep your fingers crossed he's back next week. But at the same time, I wish his basketball team all the best as well here. Well, I don't know how deep their season runs here, but as they keep winning, he keeps being unavailable. But hopefully we're going to have him back here in the near future. I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time right here on the Grid Network.